what happens when a fading action star, a hip-hop icon and a producer, famous for loud, explosive blockbusters, all collide on the same project. You get a cop story mixed with martial arts action with the energy of early 2000s hip-hop culture. But behind the scenes, the production turned into something much more chaotic. There were on-set clashes, dangerous stunts that ended in tragedy, and actors who openly disliked each other. So how did a very troubled production still manage to deliver one of Steven Seagal's biggest box office hits? Let's find out. This is the story of Exit Wounds. The story behind Exit Wounds actually started more than a decade before the movie existed. Back in 1990, a former police officer, John Westerman, wrote a novel called Exit Wounds. The book followed a tough cop story rooted in real law enforcement experience. Producer Joel Silver saw potential in it and secured the rights as soon as the novel was published. Then, the project just sat there. For almost 10 years, nothing happened, but eventually Silver dusted it off and decided the material could work as a modern action movie. At the same time, Warner Brothers executive Lorenzo Di Bonaventura helped bring Steven Seagal back to the studio, believing the character he would play would fit the formula perfectly. Orrin Boyd would be a Detroit detective with a reputation of ignoring orders if it meant stopping criminals. Early in the story, he would save the Vice President of the United States during an assassination attempt, but instead of being rewarded, he gets punished for disobeying protocol. So he's transferred to the city's worst precinct where corruption runs deep, and that transfer becomes the entry point into the real plot. Boyd slowly uncovers a group of crooked cops who are stealing drugs from police evidence and selling them back onto the street. With all that in place, all they needed now was the right supporting cast to make the whole thing work. Rapper DMX was cast as Leon Rollins, a mysterious figure who pretends to be a street dealer under the name Latrell Walker. DMX briefly appeared in Joel Silver's Romeo Must Die the year before, and his presence tested extremely well with audiences, so the studio decided to expand his role dramatically for this film. To prepare for the role, he trained for 6 weeks in boxing, kickboxing, and wrestling before filming began. Around the two leads, the production built a supporting cast that mixed experienced actors with performers that could bring a little bit of comic chaos to the screen. Isaiah Washington played Detective George Clark, Boyd's reluctant partner who slowly realizes the mess he has been dragged into. Michael J. White took the role of Sergeant Louis Strutt, the muscle-bound officer at the center of the corruption inside the precinct. Jill Hennessy was cast as Commander Annette Mulcahy, Boyd's new superior at the troubled precinct. Hennessy later said working on the film was one of the best experiences of her entire career, although she also joked that delivering serious dialogue while Seagal occasionally stood nearby without trousers during wardrobe adjustments made certain scenes challenging. Then we've got Tom Arnold, who played Henry Wayne, a hyperactive talk show host who meets Boyd during anger management sessions. And Anthony Anderson appeared as TK Johnson. The movie was shot mainly in Canada, with the production using Toronto, Hamilton, and Calgary to stand in for Detroit. One large action scene took place on Calgary City Street Bridge, where explosions and gunfire were staged on the 85-year-old structure while it was closed for restoration. Fight choreographer Dion Lamb was hired to design the combat scenes. His approach was to tailor different fighting styles to each character and combining Steven Seagal's Aikido moves with flashier martial arts techniques. 2 film units ran at the same time during early weeks of filming to handle the large number of stunts and action scenes, including vehicle chases, falls, and wire-assisted fight work. But even with all that preparation, the production suffered a devastating accident. During filming, stunt performer Chris Lamon suffered severe injuries during a stunt gone wrong and died in hospital 6 days later from a skull fracture. Another stuntman who was involved in the same sequence suffered a concussion. The accident led to an investigation into safety practices and deeply affected the crew. Away from the stunt work, the production had its share of tension. Seagal developed a reputation for being difficult on set. At one point during filming of a major fight scene, he rejected the choreography that had already been rehearsed and insisted that it was changed. That disagreement turned into a heated argument involving Seagal, the director, the fight choreographer, and the producer. Seagal eventually walked off set before the situation cooled down and filming resumed. The fight between Seagal and Michael J. White also developed a strange reputation behind the scenes. According to White, on an interview on Vlad TV, the scene was scheduled as the final moment of filming with Seagal. When he asked why, he said both the director and the producer made remarks suggesting if Seagal were injured during the fight, the remaining shots could be finished using his stunt double. According to White, he refused to play along with the idea and later described the final fight as awkward, with Seagal appearing to be cautious during the scene. There were also stories of physical injuries during training and filming. DMX has said that Seagal was hurting stuntmen purposely on set and put one of the stuntmen's head through a glass window. He also said that Seagal hurt his shoulder while they were practicing, forcing him to take time off during production. In another case, Seagal injured his knee during a car jump stunt but continued filming anyway. And he also claimed in an interview that he broke his leg while performing a wire stunt, which was his first time he ever used wire work. Some other incidents were just simply bizarre. Tom Arnold later claimed that during one scene set on his character's houseboat, Seagal decided to shoot without rehearsing the scene. He walked through the wrong door and accidentally fell into the water. There were also tensions between cast members. While being interviewed on Vlad TV, Isaiah Washington later said he had to step in when Michael J. White had enough of Steven Seagal. In a later interview though, White denied that version of events, but he confirmed there was friction around the set. DMX was even more blunt years later, describing Seagal as difficult to work with. Meanwhile, other strange stories kept surfacing. Actor David Vadim was arrested during filming after being accused of sexually assaulting a wardrobe technician on the set. Then there were more Steven Seagal stories. One stunt performer said he approached Seagal cautiously on the set because of his reputation for testing stuntmen by kicking them in the groin to see if they were wearing protective gear. During their encounter, the stuntman tried to keep his body angled away while Seagal repeatedly squared up toward him before eventually smiling and walking off. With all the reshoots, delays, and added action sequences, what started as a $25 million film eventually climbed to around $33 million by the time the production finished. When the movie finally reached theaters in 2001, the result surprised a lot of people. Seagal's career was in a downward spiral, and his last few movies moved away from the box office spotlight. So when the movie was released, expectations were cautious at best. But then opening week happened. The movie debuted at number 1 in the North American box office, pulling in around $18 million in its first 3 days. For a 2001 Seagal movie, those numbers caught the industry off guard. By the time the movie finished its worldwide run, its total came up to around roughly $79 million. In simple terms, the film made good money, but the critics were far less impressed. Many of them said the story was filled with plot holes and clunky dialogue. Others felt the action scenes lacked the energy the director had shown in his earlier film Romeo Must Die. Some reviewers even questioned how Seagal had ever become a major movie star in the first place. Now, not all the reviews were negative. One critic at the New York Times gave the film 3 out of 5 stars and described it as escapist entertainment for viewers willing to suspend disbelief and simply enjoy the action. But even while critics were rolling their eyes at the dialogue and the plot twists, the audience kept showing up, which meant that against expectations, the movie had become a genuine success. Commercially, the soundtrack performed very well. It climbed to number 8 on the Billboard 200 and reached number 5 on the top R&B and hip-hop albums chart. DMX's single also landed on the Billboard R&B and hip-hop songs chart. Once the movie's theatrical run ended, it quickly moved into the next phase of its life. Like many action films from that period, it found a second audience in people's homes. Warner Home Video released the film on DVD later in 2001. In 2014, Exit Wounds was released on Blu-ray. For fans who want to add the movie to their collection, I have added a link in the description below, and there should be a card popping up on screen to help you check it out. Now, the movie never turned into a franchise. No direct sequels, no spin-offs, nothing. But the film still ended up leaving a mark in a few interesting ways. First, it became part of a small, unofficial trilogy of action films that shared the same creative DNA. As mentioned earlier, both the producer and director tested their formula on Romeo Must Die. And 2 years after Exit Wounds, the formula returned one more time with Cradle to the Grave. Once again, it paired DMX with a martial arts star, but this time it was Jet Li, while keeping the same urban action style and hip-hop soundtrack approach. For Steven Seagal though, the film carried another kind of legacy. After this, Seagal only had one more theatrical release as a leading man with Half Past Dead in 2002. After that, his career moved almost entirely into direct-to-video territory. And we're not done yet. Next time, we dive into another classic movie. Until then, why don't you check out our previous video on Payback?
Not many men know what their life's worth.
Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.